could be my intro. It's freezing. Welcome to the season premiere of Field Trips, where I take you along with me to explore California agriculture. Today we are in Walnut Grove at Alexander Ag Flying Service, where we are going to learn about aerial application. A lot of people call it crop dusting. I am so excited. I have been a fan of the crop duster for my entire life. I get so excited to see them going over the fields, and we're just gonna learn about how essential these pieces of equipment and their pilots really are for agriculture and so much more. Today I am with Karen, the owner of Alexander Ag Flying Service, and she owns an aerial applicator, which I like to call a crop duster. And tell me how you got into this business.
I got into the business, I'll have to backtrack just a bit. So I'm going to date myself a little bit, but right out of high school in the mid 80s, I flagged for Alexander Ag Flying Service for about a year. I then went to the airlines and worked for the airlines for 20 years.
What'd you do with the airlines? Did you flag?
No, ground. I was on the ground.
Okay.
So we were all supposed to be cross-utilized, but so we worked on the ground, smaller cities where you're doing everything. So you check in the people, you load the plane, you work the gate, you work weight and balance, you're the jack of all trades.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that for 20 years. About the time that one of the major airlines was pulling out of, let's just say, Sacramento,
Mm-hmm.
we had the opportunity, my husband and I, to buy the company. And we did. We bought the company in 2007. And then in January of 2011, unfortunately, his plane hit a Met tower and he was fatally injured. So he was actually going out to to plant wheat. And generally when you think about planting or, doing dry material, even for the pilots, it's a little bit of that. You can relax just a little bit because you're not flying 10 feet off the canopy. It's a whole different ballgame.
Mm-hmm.
So he was gonna go plant wheat, and he hadn't even made a first pass, but was just getting going. And he hit a Met tower, which is a meteorological evaluation tower. The idea of those meteorological evaluation towers is that they don't really want anybody to know that they're there. Because farming wind is a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like they want it on the down low, so it wasn't marked. It was supposed to have been under the 200 mark, the threshold for being marked. So under 200 feet at the time, these particular towers didn't have to be marked.
Okay.
Lit marked. And it wasn't. Long story short, it was actually over the 200 foot.
It was.
The tower itself was 198 and some change. It had a lightning spike on it, which brought it over the AGL. So.
But they thought they were getting away with it.
They thought they were getting away with it. To add to that, it wasn't being used and hadn't been used for a couple of years, so it should have been taken down. But going back to that, we had talked to the foreman, the foreman of the company the day before, and gone over all the maps and whatnot. There was no mention of it, and he hadn't been out there for a while, so that's what he was doing, was actually looking. And at some point, you do have to sometimes come down a little bit closer to see things. He hit that, and it was 8 inches. It blended right in with the corn furrows, and then there was a slough behind it, so it was basically invisible. But because of that, some laws were changed. Our industry's always been working on those laws, but that kind of really took foot, and it gained a lot of popularity throughout the country. You know, if there's any good that came out of it, is it did eventually. It started off a few states at a time. I testified in front of Congress, and so did Steve's daughters. And then I went to Colorado, and they wanted to hear the story. And ironically, Colorado passed it before California did. It took I think 2 years to pass it here. And then in 2017, I believe it went nationwide. It was signed in nationwide. So those towers, the Met towers, have to be marked. And there's a database now. So it's gone a long ways, but they're constantly adding to it or changing it. So it'll probably always be amended, you know, whether for the good or for the bad for our industry, who knows, but it's a constant challenge.
And I think this is like a good reminder that if you live somewhere where you see crop dusters, like me, I love seeing the crop duster. I'm like on a high. I love watching it so much because I would never do it myself. So I'm just like living vicariously through watching it. So like, I mean, if you're in an area that you see them, like it's very important that if you put anything up high into the sky to let them know.
Even an antenna on a house, if it's a new, 15-foot antenna on top of the house. If it's taller than the trees surrounding your house, then there should be some kind of communication or some kind of a marker on it.
Yeah, and don't take it as like a negative thing, like, oh, you're going to have to go out of your way to do something. It's just a phone call, so you're aware, so they're aware. Like I put up, I think like 18, 20-foot pole that, I mean, it's next to the levee, and I still called you and sent you a map of where it was, just so you knew it was there. And it's not higher than the trees, but it's just like, I want to know that I did my due diligence.
Right.
And it's something that people that aren't maybe necessarily in agriculture, but a lot of people still will live out in the country and maybe not realize that, oh, I should call someone and just let them know that we're putting this thing up.
It's just totally different seeing things from the air and what's going on. The things that we take for granted, like, oh, it's no big deal. Well, but it is. It's potentially somebody's life.
Yeah.
The other thing that I've got to throw in there is, the crop dusters aren't the only low-flying aircraft. The emergency services that come in and out.
Yeah, my dad was life-flighted.
Your dad was life-flighted.
Yes.
And that was one of the things that I wanted to really get in the brains of the people in Congress, was that it's just not this. It's emergency services, but it's also the CHP, the sheriff's department that have helicopters. It's the National Guard. It's these guys that fly the wires for PG&E. And I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So it's not just us when it comes to that. There's a big area of what I would like to think could be a lot safer.
Yeah.
And it is.
There's always room for improvement.
There's always room for improvement.
Yeah.
And so here I am, almost 14 years later, still going at it.
You're still going at it.
I'm still going at it. So we decided to do this, and it was a great decision. It was going to be for the rest of our lives. And then, again, when he was killed, it took me about 8 months to figure out, was I going to keep this? What was I going to do? And my personality is, if I have to try. And if I don't try, I'll kick myself, because I would never know. So if I try and fail, then I'll just suck it up. But I have to try.
So I have a feeling that most of our audience knows that crop dusters might spray pesticides, but there are actually so many other things that the planes do that people just probably have no idea. So I don't necessarily need a list of 20 things, but what are, you can share whichever ones you want, and how, or what are the most popular ones outside of pesticides that you guys do every single year?
There's a long list. So we do spray organic as well, but we fertilize, we seed.
Seeding is huge.
Seeding.
Because when the ground's too wet, you can't get out there with the planter.
You can't get in. And we can do, even if you can, there's a lot of farmers that want us to come in because the amount of work that we can do compared to something on the ground is just there's no comparison.
I was going to say how
astronomical.
fast you can do things.
Yeah,
right?
it's pretty lickety split quick. They use aerial aircraft to go in after wildfires, for seeding again. Wildfires. I don't have a helicopter, but the helicopters dry fields or orchards. They'll dry the cherries. At least in our neck of the woods, when we get those kind of late spring rains, dry the cherries. Frost control for a lot of the crops. I know they do grapes. I'm sure that when one thing is there, they'll always try something else. Like somebody will call, like, hey, can you try to dry this or try to dry that? So there's always that, we're always evolving.
Yeah.
Always learning new things, what we can and can't do. We don't go out and just fly any day.
Right.
It depends on the weather. Mother Nature dictates everything that we do. And then it comes down to it's the weather, but it's the wind, it's the wind speed, it's the temperature, it's the inversions.
So this is the seeder that normally gets hooked onto the back of the airplane, right?
Well, the bottom of the airplane, the bottom, and it's seed, any dry material. So seed, fertilizer. We've spread chicken manure.
Oh,
yes,
fun.
yeah.
You have fun cleaning after that.
Yeah, it smells great, I might add. So this gets hooked on, and then what we do is we take off all the spray booms that are connected to the plane right now. The whole spray booms and spray system, which is the booms, and this is the pump for the spray system. That comes off, and then the spreader gets hooked on to this right below this gate box here. So this is called the gate box, and that's where once the spreader's hooked on, the seed or the fertilizer comes through there, goes through that spreader, and then it basically spreads it out.
Yeah. And then is the where it holds liquid versus dry inside the plane, is it the same?
It's the same hopper. It's called a hopper.
Okay, it's the hopper.
And on this particular aircraft, it's 500 gallons. And that hopper goes from here back to forward of the cockpit.
Okay.
So it's all held in a tank there. The fuel is in the wings.
Oh,
yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so the fuel is in the wings.
I don't know that much about planes.
And it's a working machine, so it is. It's got some bugs on it right now, and
It's an air tractor.
it's an air tractor. Get it? Air tractor.
So I know you talked about that different products weigh different amounts, so it's not like you can just put, you said it had 500 gallon tank?
500 gallon.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily you could put 500 gallons of fertilizer, liquid fertilizer versus 500 gallons of seed. So how heavy can the plane be, taking off that's considered safe?
9,400 taking off, and then 8,000 landing. So that's where it gets a little tricky, or
Okay.
it can get a little tricky, a little dicey, because of the structure of the plane. So
Okay.
landing has just so much more.
Like you're hitting the ground,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, there's force there.
Yeah.
So structurally, landing is a lot less. So, and generally, well, if the plane is full of fuel, so this isn't always the case. It's not always full of fuel, but generally speaking, like first thing in the morning, it's full of fuel. And if we go with a full load, if there is a problem, he can't come back and land with that full load of
Interesting.
fuel and whatever may be in. So there's, one thing is just flying around and trying to burn off the
Fuel.
fuel.
Okay, so just for a final question, what do you wish, and I know this is a very broad question, but what do you wish people really knew about this industry?
I wish that they knew that it's we do get a lot of bad rap, and I wish that there was more education out there, that we do a lot of good. We do an extreme amount of good. And I truly do believe this, heart and soul, that if we didn't have aerial applicators, we wouldn't have the food on our tables or the clothes on our back, because there's no way that they could keep up with the acreage by ground or that we just wouldn't have the luxury of the abundance that's available to us. It just wouldn't happen.
And then let's just say someone out there watching wanted to get into this business. Where would you tell them to start? Like, especially if someone had no background, you know? Do they need to start flagging? Is that how you get in?
Well, there aren't flaggers anymore. That was back in the day. Now it's all done by GPS. There might be somebody out there that still uses a flagger or two, but it's all done by GPS. I will say, though, I was in the best shape of my life, and I always had a great tan. So those were the perks. Yeah, it's a tough one to get into. No joke. I think it's because the liability is so high. Mm-hmm. So I would say first and foremost, you should know how to fly a plane.
Get a pilot's
license.
Which you can get at 16, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So pilot's license, get some hours under your belt, and then get some hours in what they would call a tail dragger.
Okay.
And get your hours built up. Go to a local aerial applicator and ask them, hey, can I load for you? What can I do? You know, I want to learn the ropes. Mm-hmm. And most, I think, people will tell you that that's how they started out. They started out, you know, loading the planes or whatever they did, washing planes, whatever it may have been. And then it just kind of works into one day the boss might say, hey,
it's your turn.
It's your turn. Not so much that way. I mean, there's a lot of other things that have to be done, but.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your time today. I think this is the most incredible industry. I know that I could never do it, but it is amazing. And I want people to appreciate it as much as I do, because I think you guys are essential and invaluable as well. And I think your story is really incredible. And yeah, I just thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Yay! We did it! Oh!